I never thought Valentine's Day should even be considered a holiday, as it's just a day out of any ordinary week that people make up an excuse to get with their lover. At the time when this took place, I was 15 years old, a young, naive age, where I thought everything was about me, and everyone should only be concerned about me. This is probably the reason why I never had a Valentine growing up. That never really bothered me up until freshman year of high school. I would always see everyone making these dumb posters for their lover. When I saw that, that's what made me start realizing how much not having a Valentine has gotten to me. This went on for the entire day, and it was really irritating. I was an alone kid who felt like I was misunderstood. But in reality, I was just weird. I had a terrible thought that I would try to ruin everyone's Valentine's Day. So I thought of a plan to get everyone to stop worrying about their Valentine and focus on other things. I went up to my friend Brian and explained the entire plan to him. He thought it was stupid, and he said it would never work. But he decided to go along with it because it had been a long day and he had nothing to do. My plan was to ask the prettiest girl in our school to be my Valentine, so everyone would give me the attention I wanted. As I look back, I realize that I was a selfish little kid, and that's probably the reason why I got myself into the situation I did. I went home that night and made a poster for the girl. Not that it matters for the story, but her name was Katie. Tall, blonde girl who was actually very nice to me when we talked for the first time. I have had a crush on her for a while now, and to my knowledge, she was single. I spent hours on making this poster the best I possibly could make it. I finally finished the poster, and it looked pretty good. I went to sleep and kept thinking about how everyone would react after I asked her to be my Valentine. Fast forward to the next day, and I'm eating lunch with Brian again. I told him right when the bell rings, I would run to my locker and grab the poster. He didn't really say anything, just kind of nodded his head and gave me a thumbs up. Then I heard the bell ring. I quickly walked to my locker to grab my poster. I got it out, then went and searched for Katie. Eventually, I finally found her. I mustered the courage to show her the poster. It was silent for a few seconds until she looked up at me, smiled, and hugged me. She said she would love to be my Valentine. I was shocked. I didn't really think she would actually say yes. There was a huge group of people surrounding us and cheering and laughing. But I spotted this one guy out of the crowd. He was a big dude, muscular, very tall, had brown hair and cross earrings. I didn't pay much mind to him since I was so happy. The rest of the day was great. It went on like normal, and I passed all of my tests assigned to me that day. Now is probably a good time to mention that my parents were out of town for the week. And since they were usually my ride home, and my school doesn't provide busing, that meant I had to walk home. The bell rang to end the day, and I walked out of the doors with Katie next to me. We both had to walk the same way for about a third of the way. We talked the entire time and got to know each other on the way home. We finally got to the area we had to part ways, and I walked by myself while she walked the other way. I put in my AirPods and started walking and listening to music. I wasn't being cautious of my surroundings, which I urge everyone to be cautious of all the time, because you never know when you have to react quickly to a situation. I had a weird feeling though, which made me turn around. And as I did, I saw some dude in a black hoodie rushing me from behind. I panicked and started to run away. Now, I'm not a very fast guy. I play center for our basketball team. I was pretty big, but this guy was huge. So I did what any sane person would have done and started to run. I was screaming for help as I was running, but I was still pretty far away from my house, and there were no cars driving by. He finally caught up to me and put me in a chokehold. He was yelling at me and started to drag me away into a nearby field. I was kicking, screaming, and doing everything in my power to get him off of me, but he was way too strong for me. I started to lose consciousness. All of my efforts to get him off me failed. My life started to flash before my eyes, and I closed my eyes and passed out. I woke up at the same place I blacked out at, with a huge headache and no idea what happened. It was dark out, and since my parents weren't home, there were no search parties or anything out here to look for me. I checked in my pockets to see if my phone was there, but to be expected, it was gone. I couldn't see a single thing outside. It was so dark. Thought I had no way of navigating my way out of the field. After 10 minutes pass, I see a flash of light come from my left. I turn, and I see a car driving by. I start making my way there in prayer that it was actually a car, and I could find a road, and not just my imagination. I finally made it out of the field and felt my feet touch the asphalt of the road. I sighed a sigh of relief. I thought to myself that I shouldn't move from here in case another car drives by. So I wait and wait and wait. For what felt like hours, in reality, I was only here for 30 minutes at most. I was freaking out this entire time, hearing wild animals. I can't see. I'm cold and just a young man. Finally, I see 2 headlights come into sight from the horizon. I knew that people wouldn't usually pick up hitchhikers, but I had no options. I got into the middle of the road as the car approached me. They stopped right in front of me, but never got out of the car. After a minute, they rolled down their window and spoke to me. It was a woman. She asked me what I was doing out here. I told her the entire story, and luckily for me, she believed me. She told me she wouldn't take me home or let me in her car because her children were in there, and she would by no means put them in danger for a random kid. Instead, she said she would call the police and have them come to our location. I respected her actions and waited in the middle of the road for the police to arrive. After an entire hour, the police finally arrive. They start questioning me and ask me a bunch of questions. They noticed a huge bruise on my neck from where I was being choked. They told me to get into the car so they could bring me into the police station while we wait for my parents to come back, as well as test me to see if they could identify the fingerprints that were on my neck. They tested me and started to ask a bunch of questions. I told them I knew nothing about whoever did this. I couldn't see their face since they had a hoodie on, and never really gave me the opportunity to be able to see his face. They reassured me that the fingerprints would come back in the morning, and we could figure this out then. They let me sleep in the chief's office on a couch. I had a nightmare where the exact event from before happened to me again, but this time I wasn't so lucky. I jolted up in the morning and saw my parents talking to the officer. I ran and hugged them and begged them not to leave me home alone again. They told me it would never happen again and that they were sorry. I forgave them, and the officer finally came in with the results. He asked me if I knew a kid named Carson Hutchinson. I told him I didn't. They told me and my parents that they were going to bring him in and see if I recognized him from anywhere. I agreed and waited in the station with my parents. Around an hour later, the cop arrives with a guy. They sat him in a room and started to question him. I was looking behind the one-way glass, trying to figure out if I knew him. I didn't recognize him at first, but after a few minutes of thinking, it finally clicked. It was the guy I saw in the huge group of people after I asked Katie to be my Valentine. He was the kid who was the only one not smiling or laughing, but rather, he had a sinister frown on his face, almost inhuman. It looked like his face was going to melt right off his skull. I told the officer everything after that. They thanked me and my parents for our time and allowed us to go home. The next day, I went to school and sat with Brian and Katie. After I told both Brian and Katie the story, Katie's eyes got wide. So wide, it looked painful. She told me that Carson was her ex-boyfriend that was so obsessed with her. She told me that he was insane, pledging that nobody else could be with Katie besides him. Katie looked at us both and said, "He was an awful person. He never treated me with respect or love or compassion, and he was a horrible kisser." We all laughed, and life carried on after that. Carson got arrested for attempted murder and spent years inside of the juvenile detention center until he was escorted to a real prison when he turned 18. Funny enough, me and Katie started dating a few months after Carson got arrested. And fast forward 6 years. We are now married and have 2 kids. Sometimes I lay awake at night and thank Carson for what he did. Had he not done that, I wonder if me and Katie would have made it this far. Nonetheless, this story should teach you to be wary of your surroundings. And sometimes, you can't control what happens to you, but you have to be ready and face those obstacles head on. Hello, my name is Logan. I'm a 26-year-old male, but I was 23 when this took place. Me and my wife had been married for a little over 2 years at the time of this story. She was really big on the little things, like she would love when I would text her and fake ask her out again. Basically, the stupid little things meant the most to her. Well, around this time in particular, it was Valentine's week, and I figured my wife would want me to ask her to be my Valentine. I took her to her favorite restaurant and asked her there. She was so happy and wasn't afraid to show it in front of everyone in the restaurant. I loved that about her. She was embarrassed to be with me, and she could express herself when she is happy. Fast forward to Valentine's Day, as we were getting ready to go to this fancy restaurant and have dinner. We decided we were going to take a cab since we didn't want to risk us both getting wasted and getting on the road. We waited outside for the cab for about 15 minutes. He finally pulled into our driveway. I opened the door for my wife and then got in myself. Once I got in, the man who was driving asked me, "Where are you heading?" I told him the destination, and we started driving there. The man was a very nice person. He offered us water and a snack while he drove. We declined since we didn't know the man like that, but he never took offense to it. Finally, we arrived. Me and my wife both got out of the car. Before we went inside, the man asked me to come to his driver's side window. He wanted to ask me something. I walked over and he said, "Hey man, you guys are probably going to get drunk. It's a special night, you know." How about I take you home too for free? I wouldn't want to see good folks like you getting ripped off by someone who wants to con some drunk people out of money. I was ecstatic about this, and I agreed with him. Looking back on it, I should have known this was too good to be true. I thanked the man and gave him a really generous tip. A tip of $150. Yes, I know, but me and my wife weren't exactly struggling with money. And plus, the guy was such a nice man through the drive, and he offered to take us home for free. His eyes widened, and his words started to stutter. He said, "You don't know how much this helps me, thank you so much." I smiled at him, then made my way to the restaurant. I got inside, me and my wife were seated at our table, and we had an amazing night. As expected, we were both plastered. I don't really remember much after that, other than me and my wife getting into the cabbie that we were in earlier. The next morning, I woke up with a terrible headache. My wife was still asleep, so I walked to the bathroom to take a shower. While I was undressing, I cleaned out my pockets in order not to lose any of my valuables. While I was taking all of my stuff out of my pockets, I noticed a crumpled up piece of paper fall out of my left pocket. I had no idea what it was, I thought to myself. I never had a piece of paper in my pocket last night. I chucked it up to get the receipt of the dinner last night and looked at it to see how much the night was. I started reading, and I felt my heart drop down to my stomach. It wasn't a receipt. Rather, it was a note. The note read, "Hello, sir. This is the cab driver from last night. I just wanted to confess my actions from last night. If I don't, the guilt will eat me up. I was planning on killing you and your wife after you got into the cab drunk. I was planning on robbing you for everything you had. But after you gave me that generous tip, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I know this may come as a shock to you, but thank you. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't remember the driver's face since I was drunk the whole night, and my memory was foggy. I still called and filed a report with the police, but with lack of evidence, they couldn't really do much. I never told my wife about this. I don't think this is something I should tell her. She's spooked easily, and I don't want her losing sleep at night because of this like I did.